Okay.
Okay, here we go. Let's have fun. Hi there, I'm Dani Henderson. Welcome back to my beautiful channel. He's back. You guys have requested him. You've asked me, where is the very right Reverend Dr. Chriss Lemmon? Well, here he is, ladles and jelly beans, back on screen with me, Dani Henderson. This man has been a mentor of mine for over 22 years. I've learned more about science and metaphysics and the known and the unknown and ideas and patterns and realization of phenomena through this great man. Welcome, sir. Welcome, Dr. Chriss. How are you, my love?
I'm great. Just kind of chilling out a little bit. We had a snowstorm, a lot of the country did, and it's pretty having everything white and there's a little less traffic out there. It's kind of nice. I'm watching the icicles drip off the roof, and that's kind of fun. Um,
Excellent. Excellent. So I know that we've got quite the topic to cover today. Again, to give people a different, you're not run of the mill, nothing run of the mill about you, which is why I learned from you for so many years. You are very your own person. You master your own thoughts. You're not influenced. You don't let people influence you. You don't let yourself be swayed this way or that way. Again, a very, very noble aspect or value for a person to have. So I'm going to just let you get straight into what we were discussing, phenomena. You started with a newborn baby coming in and knowing nothing, but please do start wherever you wish to start.
okay. All right. You know, what I people used to always tell me, what do you believe in? I used to always say, I believe in you. I really think that everybody should be unique. Somewhere, yeah, I read a lot of books, so I got a lot of data, and it doesn't make the data a particular truth. It just gives me a bigger range to be able to find out what works for me. And so in around 1950, we, as a group, at least in the US and most of Europe, had reached an evolutionary change. It's just, read books on evolutionary psychology. It's like, all the psychics and the prophets have been predicting it forever. But bottom line is, all of a sudden we started arriving there. And what we saw happen after that is people started moving away from the idea of an absolute truth. A lot of people thought that had something to do with religion. It's not so much a God image, but it's like kings and emperors and the idea that God is an old white man on a chair. Come on, I'm an old white man. I've never wanted to be a God. Give me a break. So, so we're moving away from those concepts, and we're trying to be able to get along with people. We have to be able to respect the fact that they have a different opinion than you. So when I started teaching, everybody walked in the door, whatever they believed in, I'm fine with that. It's like, well, whatever. It's like whatever works for you, however you perceive the interaction, and whatever your goal was. Yeah, I get on a cruise ship and I'm looking around and people are saying, "Oh, where's the boats? What would happen in an emergency?" I'm thinking about, if there's an emergency, I'm going to be looking around and figuring out, like, how can I help someone? What can I do? How could we change the situation? I'm not worried about finding the boat. I mean, I don't care about getting off. I don't care about any of that. I don't want to get out of the game. I want to squeeze as much as I can out of it. I I grew up a kind of a sickly kid, so I played inside. I was just, you know, and what I love about you is that you've had challenges in life and you rose above them. It's just kind of amazing. And that's what I respect in people the most. It's like people have a challenge, instead of sitting there whining, "Oh, well, I can't do that." It's like, no, do something different. Get up, do something, expand out a little bit, figure out what you're going to do it, and then do something else, and then do something else. And that makes the game engaged. It makes it fun to participate. So I used to teach workshops. I'd have people concept. Some of the things are my ideas, some are other people's ideas. It didn't matter, whatever. I brought guest speakers in, and the idea was to get an expanse so you could find where your little niche is, how you work. And and I watched you as a great example. It's kind of like you just flourished. It's like you found who you were and what you were doing, and you just kind of went with it. It's like, wow, okay, that's great. And, so when you come back and you say, "Well, I've taught you something." No, I didn't teach you something. I just took the leash off so you could run, right? It's just like, so you could go with it, because you have huge talent and you're just an amazing individual. And that's where it sits. We had some people in class, you can probably remember, that sat there and they were kind of looking for some prophecy or some enlightenment or some, I don't know what. It's like, gosh, get off your butt, go do something. experience something in life, interact with people, expand it out. That's what we're supposed to be doing right now. We're supposed to be able to find a way where we can finally end wars and get along with everybody and quit abusing everybody with our silly ideas, because it's like it's and you can see the process. You got to remember, evolutionary processes take 2, 3, 400 years. So I'm not waiting for an end of it. My end is going to come a lot sooner than the end of that. But I think it's easier for you as a person to engage in a process rather than fight it. If the wind is blowing, it's like go downwind or get out of the wind. Just don't fight with it. Start to notice what it's doing. So people, like I said, they've always asked what I believe in. I I believe in potential. I believe that when a child is born, they were just a creative piece. They didn't have a whole skillet. They didn't have a map. They didn't have a manual. They didn't have a cell phone. They had no idea what to do. And they had a huge learning process that took them a long time. Uh, and yes, we humans are born, we know, with biases. We all of a sudden, very, very young, we start to favor people that look like us, people that talk like us, people that act like us. So there's a natural tendency within the structure as we develop into what I call the logical world. Logical world is language, the way your ideas come into your head, they're all logical expressions. But logical world doesn't explain phenomena. When all of a sudden you see a spirit or you see something happening, you go over there and you try to talk about it, and half the people think you're crazy. It's not because of the idea that you see, because that's just a piece of data, but it doesn't come into logical structure. So it doesn't fit into our language structure. So our limitation is our language structure. Yep. If you look at, like, for example, mathematics today, if somebody gets a PhD in mathematics, the work they did is not even in this dimension. It's just so crazy to think that somebody is working with I numbers, imaginary numbers. They're doing math with imaginary numbers. What in the world are they doing? Where are they coming from? They talk about woo-woo. That's pretty woo-woo, right? And so you start to see where we have to go to get information is where we have to go to get informed, right? And it's different for everybody. And so I can remember in China back in the 90s, we were all hanging out. There was about 70 of us on a trip. And we went to a Chinese guy that was doing the sticks. You shake them and you throw them out, and the guy was reading them. And so it was kind of fun, and he was actually pretty good. So most psychics that I used to hit around the world, because we're Americans, they'd always say, "Oh, you're so rich and you're blah, blah, blah." It's like all the same story. But this guy was kind of like, he was pointing out things like, "Oh, you've got like, you got like one sister, or you got this or this going on your fun, or you don't get along with your mother, but you get along really good with your dad." He had all kinds of things that were a little more concrete. So he was a pretty interesting reader. And one of the guys in the group went up and he threw the sticks out, and this reader looked down at the sticks and just turned around and walked away. And we're all standing there saying, "Wow, that's interesting." And we're teasing the guy. See, not only do we not like you, but no one else in the world likes you. And we're just joking with him. But 6 months later, he died. So basically, the reader didn't know how to say that. He could see that. He didn't know, he just was lost. He couldn't say, how do I tell someone they're going to die? It's just like, it was perplexing. And he even left his money there. It's like he just went off because he was so intimidated by that. I think what you have to do is, when you start to get a flow of knowledge or information, you have to kind of go with it to see where it's going to go. And then the picture gets bigger, and maybe the information becomes more informed. Um, it just, you get clues to things. And I don't know. I got a kick out of telling somebody was communicating to me, and they found this watch place up by Mount Adams where you could go up and you could sit in this field and you could watch all the aliens come out of the mountains at nighttime. Okay, that's cool. But I have been up on Mount Adams, and what you do when you're going to go climb Mount Adams, you go up in the middle of the night, or you go up at night before it gets dark, because the road is really vicious. It's a narrow 1-lane road up into the base camp. But you go up there in the middle of the night or before dark, and you camp out. And then just before sunlight, you get up, you got your lights on, you got all this stuff, and then you start to hike up the mountain. The trail is pretty easy going in the dark in the morning. And by the time it gets sunlight, you're up on the mountain. It takes about 12 hours to make that trip. So you come back at base camp at night, and then you got lights on and everything, and you're cooking, and there's a whole bunch of people, and you're chattering around, you build a fire. All those experiences are going on the side of the mountain. So I could have said, you're crazy. That's just people climbing a mountain. But, that might be true or might not be true. That's logical. But the fact that they've all got together and they're all sitting out there in chairs in that field, that has a lot of value. I don't care what the story is. They're talking to each other, they're making friends, they're interacting. It doesn't matter if it's BS or not. It makes no difference. It really doesn't. It's just they have built friendships that are going to last forever. And that is what's rewarding. They have learned to get along with all these people, are getting along, having a communication. So it's like, that's what we should be doing. And we should be doing more of that rather than all this argumentation. But anyway,
Yeah.
it's going to be whatever it's going to be. I may not see the end of that whole process, but that's where it goes. And we see that also in family. It's just like my family had totally different ideas. It was really easy. One morning they went to church and I just left a note and saying, I'm moving on. See you later. And about 20 years later, they showed up on my doorstep. They found me when my daughter graduated from high school. They saw the last name and tracked me down. I can remember coming back. I lived in Southern California when I was, I was born in Pennsylvania, but I lived in Southern California from about age 9 on for a while. And so I came back many, many years later to and eventually taught some classes down there. I came back to see my son. And I went back to the high school I went to, and I walked in and I said, hey, are you guys going to have a 50-year reunion? Because I'd been going for 50 years. And they looked at me and they said, who are you? And I told them, and they said, we thought you were dead. And I go, I don't think so. Maybe soon, but not right now. And they said, wow, everybody in your class is dead. It's like, wow. Okay, now, Vietnam, so, it took a lot of men and women, both, right? Because of the military situation. So, okay, that's great. It was a small school. It was only a couple hundred kids. So maybe I had, I don't know, maybe 80 kids in a graduating class. But I'm sitting there thinking, are you sure? And they say, and a teacher there had been a teacher. She was now the principal. And she was there and she said, I'm being ready to retire. And I came here teaching. I remember teaching you when I was young. And she said, I kept obituaries on anybody who I recognized from my days and a paper, and I cut them out. So I have a scrapbook here of obituaries, and I can go through and I can tell you everybody in your class I have an obituary for. We tried to get hold of you and call you and stuff, but we couldn't find you. Well, my mother, my father died, my mother remarried, so she had a different last name. So when I moved out of the house, there was no way to get hold of me. That was pretty much gone, and I left the state. So it was long gone. So it's an interesting reality to sit there and think, wow, all those people that I talked to all had a dream in life, all had the answer, all figured out that what they were going to do. They were going to be engineers, they were going to be scientists, they were going to be doctors, they were going to do whatever they were going to do. And they all had a story running around. And they used to come to me and say, what are you going to do? And I said, I have no idea. I have no clue. I, you know, and so I'm just going to wander around and figure out what's going to work for me. And it's like, so I'm still wandering around figuring out what's going to work. I just like people say what you've done. And well, I've done a lot of things, right? I haven't done anything for a real long time. Um, I'm happily married now, but I've been happily married half a dozen times. So that's, you know, uh, so um, it's just the interesting thing is a lot of people are still trying to secure into that. It's going to be this way. Okay, maybe it's going to be that way for you. And that's good. And if you're informed about that, that's also good, right? Um, if I see somebody with a cold, do I think I'm going to get a cold? No, the first thing I think is like, what are you taking for that cold? I make a suggestion. I'm trying to be helpful, right? It's like, I'm not worried about getting a cold. I'm worried about them getting well, right? That's my agenda is like, oh, because if I can sit there with them and they can become well, then I have a piece of knowledge about getting well that's going to serve me. Otherwise, what am I going to do? Read it in a book or have some medical person tell me something? It's like, no, I want to have a personal interaction. I want to get over there and get my hands into it and have an experience with it, right? It's just no doubt about it. And so I think that's what's fun. I was on that trip to China. We were in Hong Kong, and Temple Street is where the psychics come out at nighttime, supposedly. So I'm going like, hey, I'm going to go down to Temple Street and get a reading. And all these people in a group, they said, yeah, we're going to do that too, right? So I went down there. I had a lady with me and was traveling with me. And we went down there and I looked around and I was just looking at the energy. All these people were, doing whatever they're doing. And I saw this lady was talking to a Chinese man. And I was looking at her energy and she had kind of a respected space. She had a little buffer between her and him. And I thought, okay, this is kind of cool. She's actually, not trying to become him. She's actually just reading his energy. So we went over it. Both of us got a reading from him and we talked to her. I shared some stories with her. Uh, she had a she had a pain in her head. And I said, do you want me to take that out of your head? And she said, well, you can't. I said, what do you mean I can't? Of course I can. I can or I can't. It's like, I didn't ask you whether I could or not. I asked you, do you want me to take that out of your head? And she said, go ahead. So I took it out of her head. And she's kind of like, oh my goodness. And she says, what was that? And it says, I don't know. I think it's a family member, like a brother or someone judging you because you haven't become what he thought you should become. And she goes, oh my gosh, yes, my brother hates what I'm doing. And I said, well, you should just talk to him a little bit. He's either judging you, but he might be worried about you, or he might be mad at you, or all the above. But if you want to keep that out of your head, you better come to terms with him and let him find you. Let him find out who you are, right? This is great. Actually, I sent letters back and forth to her and sent her some literature. But when I got back to the group the next morning, we're having breakfast, and I said, hey, who got a reading down there? It was fun. And they're all going back. We couldn't find anybody that spoke English. And that never crossed my brain. It's like, that was never. So I'm thinking, of course, why are they going to do a reading for $1 when that's like, yeah, most of them are not going to speak English. I got that. And how did I find her? Or the other question is, did she actually speak English? Right? So I'm looking at this lady who was with me and I said, did she speak English? And she goes, I don't know. It's kind of like an ozone thing. I go, wow, it's kind of interesting. So, maybe if I recorded it, we would have found the whole thing was in a different language. I don't know how many times I've traveled and I've talked to someone. I found out later they didn't speak English. I don't know what I thought I was doing, but so, those are what I call phenomena. It's just not logical. It doesn't make any sense at all. Am I happy to be crazy? Yes, I think the greatest value in my life is that I'm crazy, right? And so that craziness is what allows us to gather some information. I would have never got that reading from her. I would have never got that exchange. I would have never been able to communicate with her had I just put up a wall saying, well, I can't speak their language or this is going to be a problem. Uh, if she didn't speak English, I would have just paid her that $1 or $2 or whatever it was and sat down and left her just ramble on in Chinese to me. It's like, it would have been fine, right? It makes no difference. It would have been fun. It would have been a great experience. And that's what I see people judge and cast out. They want it to look a certain way. It's okay. If they want it to look a certain way, then they're in charge of creating that. I'm not, right? But I'll support their creation. I don't have a problem with their creation. Go for it.
Yeah, they're potentially putting limits on it as well, limiting the outcome to try and hold that energy frequency rather than let that expansion be there. There's so many great things here that you mentioned, and that I want to just cover very quickly before we continue. You mentioned that the mathematician, the brilliant mathematician, is doing mathematics that isn't in this dimension. And that's something, again, an invitation for people to really think about that, what you said. They are working with numbers, energies, frequencies that are not in this dimension. Brilliant. You mentioned Mount Adams. Now, a friend of mine, his name is James Gilliland, and he's so well known for sitting on his beautiful sanctuary of land opposite the Mount Adams and filming the most insane array of motherships and scout ships and cigar ships and consciousness ships. And they're there. And I know there's a military base there as well. Because
Right.
you raised Mount Adams, a lot of people that watch my channel, they also know about James too. He's actually just got another sanctuary area in one of the islands in Hawaii. I think he's on the Big Island now. But people go there and they have this experience. But like you were saying, everyone's engaging with each other. There's a creation, a connection, an energetic harmonizing that happens because we know there is phenomena,
Oh, yeah.
when we are expanding, we say, to it. The psychics that you mentioned, let me put my glasses on. The psychics, one of the things you said was that the man whose life was going to shift, he was going to end this life and start another. The reader walked away, didn't engage, didn't converse, just left. Now, I want people, again, watching this, because there is people that get a little bit silly and they come undone because then they let a fear picture come in their space.
Right.
They're like, oh God, I went to a reader and she stopped reading me. Or there's people that ask me to read them all of the time. And lately, because I've been doing other things to try and reach more people, like my conference, I am seeing less people. It doesn't mean I think they're going to die. So again, I want to invite people, as they're listening to you and we're sharing information, that we don't go down into that fear picture energy field and start thinking down the line going, oh my God, I remember when this and that. We've got to let that fear go. It's just holding us back. You mentioned that you, and this is where I learned so much from you, you see energy, you look at people's energy. So I would like to ask you to share, when you talk like that, when you say, I see energy, I'm looking at their energy, how do you do it and what do you see?
Well, I think that the first thing I see when I bump into someone, the first thing I start to notice in my mind is like, what do they have to communicate? What do they have to say? Like, because they're just a stranger, right? And I had an experience when I was a little kid, and I was probably 9 years old. And we were on a road trip with my parents, of course, and we had stopped at a hotel earlier because they were tired of driving. The weather had been windy, and so they decided to stop around 4 o'clock, something like that, at this hotel. And I went outside because it was still light. Normally we'd stop later. And I went over, and there was a guy working at the grounds of the hotel. So I went over and I was just talking to him. And we just talked for about an hour. It was just really, really good. And then I came back in again. So it was nice because I got to talk to somebody on a trip other than my parents, and it was kind of fun. In the morning, I was with my stepfather, and he was paying a bill. And he said, I want to thank your worker out there for putting up with my son for an hour. They were out there just talking and talking. And the guy at the desk says, oh, your son speaks Spanish. And my stepfather says, no. And he said, well, Jose doesn't speak any English. So I have no idea what was going on, you know. So I think that first I started seeing things and reacting to things and talking about people when I was a kid, because I would see something and I would notice that somebody would come in, they'd be sit down and they would look a little depressed. And I would just look at them for a while. I would just observe. And it's like I'm asking the question in my head, why are they upset? And then I'm starting to see some things. Then I look around and the other people are not looking at them. They're turning away from them. So it's like, oh, wow, it's interesting. The other people don't want to see whatever's going on with them. And And I'm just not afraid of it because I'm not going to, I'm just seeing what's going on. That's all, right? It's just information. Um, so many people are afraid of the information. It's like it makes a demand on them. They have to do something about it. They like, oh my goodness, you know, don't look at that person. Like, I'm not only am I going to look at them, I'm going to go talk to them. Right. So I look for into interaction because I think the interaction strengthens me. It gives me more range. So it's diversity. So this lady was sitting there. She was just sick. She had been to a doctor. She got the story, blah, blah, whatever. None of that as a kid could I make sense of. But I just went down there and sat with her and talked with her. And pretty soon we were just kind of laughing and joking around, and her spirits came up. Now, today we would call that a healing, right? Um, so, but it wasn't like I was doing something mystical, magical. I was just being there. I was totally being there and not afraid of her experience. And it took her out of the fear of her experience. I don't know if she lived or died, but it's just like that doesn't matter. What did matter is at the moment. That's the communication that mattered. So that's what I always sought out in life. No matter where I went. And it was always fun. I'd have people that come up to me and said, "Oh, um, Chris, I've been waiting to talk to you." And I look at them and I'm going, wow, that's interesting. Okay. And so we have a conversation, and I met a little guy in Tibet one time. We had gone, I was with a large group and we were in Tibet, and I had a woman come over and say, "I want to invite you to an event we're having tonight." And so I said, "Oh, thank you." And I just thought everybody was going to the event. I didn't know, nobody else knew about it, right? So that evening, right, everybody was, yeah, everybody in my group, we had 40 people, and everybody in my group was going down for dinner. And I'm going like, I can't go for dinner. I've got an event to go to. You guys aren't going to the event? And they go, what event? I said, okay, never mind. So I went over and I'm sat in a chair, and they have some Tibetan kids out dancing and doing stuff. And then they're pushing it, taking a glass and some type of a booze or something. I don't know what it was. Pour it in a glass and take a drink, and you pass it around, goes all around the circle. So we just did that. I was sitting there at that show, and then when the show was at the end, and the guy that was putting it on got up and he told everybody, okay, thank you very much, blah, 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 whatever. And he said, in closing, I want to introduce you to my friend here who came to our show tonight. It was like, wow, thank you. I didn't know I had a friend. Uh, so that's, see, if I would not have hung on to that phenomena, if I would have not saw that, then then I would have never been there. So you miss that interchange. So could I write about it in a book? Somebody think I'm just totally crazy, right? It's like, yeah. So I can I can I can share stories with this lady because we're both crazy together. It's good news. And and because of that, why we get a lot of information that we would not have gotten. We really got to pay more attention. The phenomena are always going to be there. You just got to keep looking and not turn away. And God, I see
Yeah.
so many people just training intuitives. I had a guy came in and had a lot of pain in his life. He actually died a year later. Um,
Mm.
and he sat down, and the readers were, some new readers were trained. And one of them got up and came over to me and said, I can't do this. I can't handle the pain. And I said, well, it's not your pain, it's his pain. Talk to him about his pain. Maybe you could help him some way, shape, or form, right? And so it's kind of like, so he came and he took classes, the guy with the pain. He actually took classes from me. And he'd come along and he said, I thought you guys were all just a bunch of BS, some kind of a church or something. And I'm Jewish. So I figured I don't care about your Jesus stories or anything. I'm just going to hang out because you guys were kind of crazy and fun. And he said, and then I took the class and I realized, oh, that's not what you guys are about. This was really kind of interesting. So he hosted a workshop for me. And it was like, I had like 60 people in a workshop. He rented the top floor of a hotel and he hosted this workshop. And when it was all done, I said, thanks, that was really kind of fun. There's a lot of people I didn't know. It was a lot of new things. He said, well, I really like what you did. I wanted to support it. And 4 weeks later, he died. So it was like uh, he was looking for something in life that he could accomplish. He told me that he had a position in as an attorney. He had a position in DC, and he wrote a lot of speeches for candidates and stuff. And he said, I had too much power. I could write anything and they would just read it. And he said, that's way too much power. And he said, I quit because it scared me, that I thought that was
Wow.
a disaster. And then my twin brother died of a heart attack. And at that point, I knew I was going to go next. Like, wow, that's an interesting story. So he believed it. Well, I'm sorry, I'm sorry he believed it, but that's just the way it was. But we had a lot of fun. And actually, he lasted 2 years. And after his brother's death, it was like within a week of the date of his brother's death. And so we actually had him cremated, and we threw his ashes in the ocean down there in San Diego somewhere. So it's like, so it's just fun. There's that may not seem fun to somebody, but it gave me a chance to meet someone. It gave me a chance to interact with someone, and it gave him a chance to throw a party for 60 people. He made a lot of friends, and all of a sudden he went from being depressed to all of a sudden being like a really nice person. It's like, wow, that's it. I don't care he died. It was a healing in its own right because he got some joy out of life, even though he had this
Mm,
stigma that, we're twin brothers. So if he dies, I die. Whatever that story is, I don't know, but that's that's just it, right? I
yeah.
can't do anything about
Well,
that.
that's such an interesting point too, because I remember, and thank you. I know you read my book recently, and I was
Yes.
honestly so flattered that you read my book.
Well,
And
I liked
because
it.
again, thank you. You've never gone into teaching any of us, and you've taught hundreds and hundreds of people. I mean, our classes could be up to 100 people, like for real.
Yeah.
And 2 or 3 times a week. At one point, I was coming to your center 4 times a week, for
Yeah.
ministry. I would become a reverend through you and all
Yeah.
different kinds of things. I mean, it's so many different, just so many different exercises I'd never even conceived of. And when I've taught people some of your techniques, the one where you rub your hands together so you can actually feel your own electromagnetic force, your own energy,
Yeah.
by just barely bringing them apart. And then I teach people to create the heat and then put the heat on them for self-healing or for their children. And another one you taught us was where there's pain in the body, imagine a golden straw coming out of the body. From that pain out, imagine a balloon at the end of it, and imagine telling that, using the messaging center in the brain, sending that pain down into that balloon. I have taught so many children, so many older people in pain, that technique. And what I do still to this very day, if I get a headache, which is very rare, I will imagine it as a black dot. I'll bring it to the front of my forehead and I'll grab it and I'll throw it away. And it works.
Right.
But people that go, you're a mad cow. I'm like, okay, it works. Again,
Right.
it's like you said, people can look at you and I and think we're crazy, but luckily we don't give a shit, which is so freeing. Like that's freedom.
Right.
Right. That is freedom right there. But
Right.
yeah, so many different, I could go 1,000 different ways with so many examples that just come to mind of your teachings, the way you teach, the way you taught, the things you said. One of the biggest things you said that I really did respect, and it wasn't reverse psychology, even though you are a literal psychologist. You used to say, don't follow me, because you get people that would come to class and they would be so enamored with you, and then they would pop into the belief system of you're an authoritarian, you know more than most people, you have all this, what some people think is magical ability, you see energy, you feel it, you've been responsible for literally pulling people back from the brink using these beautiful, very free techniques that we have as a being. And then you would never stand for it. Sometimes you were outright bloody rude. And you say to people, I'm going to rattle your cage. And I
Right.
just be sitting there like, oh, Jesus, don't talk to me. Like, so funny, because you didn't put boundaries on yourself, you didn't put limitations on yourself, you were always this free flowing. Somebody would come and stand in front of you, they'd be like, Chris, I'm sick, I'm in pain, and you would just stand and look at them, and then you might put a hand gently on them for a few seconds, and then something would shift in their field, and suddenly that whatever that was they were holding on to, it went. Then you would say, like you said to that woman, that's a pattern stuck in the body, it's energy
Yeah.
from your brother judging you, there's a guilt picture somewhere in your field that's getting triggered. I mean, how else would you explain that? What
That's
other
just what I
terminology?
said. I had to attend to what's going on. So I would just look at someone and their mouth is going, I'm not even paying attention to what they're saying because what do I care, right? And I'm looking at them thinking, what is this? I had a troubled young man one time come to a seminar I did. We did it in a women's center, so there was about 80 chairs in there, so it was about 75 people. And he was outside and he was down tying his shoes, and I never seen him before. And I'm walking with two people, and they looked over at him, and he had this big black thing, looks like it was sitting on top of his head. And I just looked over and I used to teach karate for years. I've done a lot of things. And so I did this side kick right above his head. And everybody's kind of looking at me like, what am I doing? And the guy turned around to me and he goes, oh my gosh. And nobody said anything then. And when the whole seminar was over that day, he came over to me in the close and he said, I had such a headache. There was so much pain in my head. And I'm walking along, and then my shoe became untied. And I was just like, I'm going to go home. I just can't do this. There's one more thing. I can't take one more thing, right? It's like so silly, but we've all been there. And he's down tying his shoes, being all pissed off. And I make this kick above his head, and all of a sudden his headache went away. And 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 he said, how did you know? And I said, I didn't know. I looked and I saw that and I go, that shouldn't be there. It's like you go up to someone that got some dirt in your shoulder and you brush it off. That's whatever. I just brushed it off and it went away. I probably could have done it less dramatically, but I didn't think about it, right? I just thought, there it is. It's got to go. It was just engulfing him. Um, yes, I mean, he had some stuff going on without a doubt, but we all have stuff going on and we just can't let it tear us apart. And sometimes we need to sit down with someone else and help. That's it. So that's what I love this lady for. It's like she's helped millions of people. And so it's just a question of sitting down and saying, I can't get my head around this. And they said, well, of course not. It's not even your idea. Get it out of your head. Just quit trying to figure out other people's ideas. Relate. That's it. The secret is just to relate. How you do that, I don't care. If you try to relate logically, then it's going to be try to have a conversation. There are tons of books out there. There's a story about um, I'm just going to make it short. There's a story about a guy. I think his name was Daryl, but he was a black guy, and he actually met up with a a grand wizard or something from the KKK. This is a story from a few years back, but he actually built a friendship with him, and actually later on, this guy quit and got other people to quit because all of a sudden they realized that that whole racism thing was just like totally ridiculous. And and so that was just from a conversation. He had he had the courage to talk to someone who hated him and be able to show up and be real and heal them both. And so it could be in a conversation, but it's just simply you pay attention, either you listen to someone or you see the energy or you work with the energy, you make it move. So the classes were all about getting people to notice energy flow, getting to see that this energy does flow. It's not really hidden from you. You just got to pay a little more attention. You can start to get a lot of information from it. And and like I said, I see people turn away. They just totally turn away. And and I uh, I was in Thailand, and there was a guy that was crippled. He had a amputee, a missing leg or something. And he was sitting out there, and he had a cup out. And I wasn't going to go donate money. I just saw him sitting over there, and I'm thinking in my head, my brain goes, I wonder what happened to him. And then all of a sudden I see this explosion. And I go over to him and I say, do you speak English? And he goes, a little bit. And I said, you were in an explosion? And he shook his head. And I said, what was that? And he said, landmine. I said, oh, wow, that's amazing. So you just were wandering along and you found an old landmine from, way back when. He said, I said, no. So the government allows you to, because you're injured, the government has you allows you to do that to support you. He said, yes, only injured people can beg legally. I said, oh, good. So I stood next to him and I said, let's see what we can do about getting you some lunch money. And so I just smiling and watching people come by, and pretty soon people were gathering around. And I said, hey, I forget his name now, but I said, hey, I want you to meet my friend. And I introduced him, and they said, he got blown up in a landmine. Can you imagine that? There, this is interesting. And people were putting money in there. It's like, gosh. So it was just, he didn't have enough energy to make it happen. So I just stood there and it just happened. And it just all flowed in. And so literally when I left, he was in tears because somebody had cared enough, like whatever. I didn't give him any money, but I supported him. Sometimes that's all you need to do is support someone just to make a difference in the world.
Yeah, that's so true on so many levels. It's funny with humans where we put our attention on something. Like I remember one time years ago going with a gang of friends to, it's called center parks. So there are these cabins in the woods and you ride bikes and you swim in the pool and there's a slide that goes on, and then the rivers that come along. It's all indoors because obviously England's bloody freezing, -5 today. And I remember going just for a giggle. And I thought I would just stand in the reception area, which is so busy. Everyone's checking in and just look up. And I just kept looking up. And my friends are coming around me and they're like looking up with me. And I'm doing my best not to laugh because it's so funny how everyone is like standing, like looking up. Like, what are we looking at? And I said, a dead bird, a dead bird. It was like that kind of hysteria, that hypnotic hysteria,
right?
Because us humans, like, we're so sweet and we're so gullible in so many ways. And there was an element of the child, like the wonderment, like what, and there's a magic and a beauty in that because it was positive. Well, it was a bit naughty, but nobody died. I always say, as long as nobody died, we're all good. There are others that assert that energy and they'll wrap it and they'll drag it and they'll put it to something else where then our attention is shifting, and some of us get stuck in that and we get trapped in that. And we, I was with my sister today, we were going around churches in Sussex countryside, and we were at one church, the first Saxon church in Britain. Is called St. Berwick, Berwick, Berwick Church. And we're going along and, I don't want to see the Christ hanging on the cross. It annoys me. And like, if that bloke was alive today, I'm pretty sure we'd like, take that bloody cross down. That's the devil saying, I have dominion over you. These are my thoughts. But oh my God, people get so triggered, they want to kill you, which is their ancient DNA triggering. It's not even their thought, right? They've learned it. They've trained in it. They believe it's true. As long as nobody, is anybody looking at you? Yes. What are you going to do? I'm going to damn you for saying that about Jesus. I'm like, oh, shut up. Get your own life, get your own thoughts kind of thing. Right. But I was making little videos and my sister's filming, and she's so good though. I mean, she's used to me. I mean, I'm such a handful. And she's younger than me as well, which is good, I think. I can see she's getting triggered in her energy because I'm saying, see that? Jesus on the cross? You should not be on the bloody cross like that, And I said to her after, I said, well done, well done. Because I know, because these are some of the most sensitive subjects that we lose our shit over. They're not even our thoughts. They're not even our beliefs. We've been programmed, to be told that this is the way it is. Otherwise, the consequence is, and on the back of that, there's fear. It's fear. Right. It's a fear program, right? So how do people learn to recognize in themselves fear programming, fear pictures in their space? And how can we, again, allow people to see that when they look at someone else, whether they're in training with them in their energy field or just observing or whatever, that they too can see something without physically seeing it with their eyes and trigger a fear picture that that person's got matching energy? How can we help people kind of, get to grips with the thinking that we're expressing here, and how to kind of help themselves learn that, expand that muscle in them?
Yes. Sometimes it's just that you've got to start a story with them. So sometimes they'll notice something, and if it's a phenomena, they try to translate that into language. And our body, the first things we learn is programming to move. Everything gets stored somewhere in the body. So our basic, what we call unconscious programming, is movement patterns. A baby moves. I can remember when I was 5 years old, my aunt had a child, little girl, and I was watching my grandmother, then diapers were pinned on, and she jabbed that little girl. Typical thing happened with pin diapers. And the little girl sunk her side in, and I saw that, and then my grandmother said, watch her. She had changed her diaper. She says, watch her so she don't fall. We had her laying on the couch, and I'm sitting there watching her, and just for kicks, I just took my finger and touched her side where she got jabbed, and you could see her pull her stomach in. I touched the other side and she didn't. So for weeks after that, I'd try every once a week, I'd go over and touch that side, and she would pull in on that side and not on this side. And it was interesting because that became the source later in life of all this restraint in here, became the source of a cancer that she finally had to have removed out. And you start to look at that, it's like I was too young then to be able to figure out how to get that fear out of her. It was something she dealt with all her life. So, and just one of those things. At 5, I had no clue. I could see what was going on, but I had no clue. So now today I started realizing I can make a story of that. If I'm working with a kid, I'd say, wow, does that hurt? Can you feel that? What is that? Can we move that out? Can we put that over here? So you start to make a story out of it if there's an action, because we humans, yes, we process with stories, but we're all about movement. And so if you can integrate a movement into it, then your movement is your controlled energy producing the idea of you and no longer responding without interaction to a fear. And so the more that you can interact with a fear, that you're better off. Is like someone comes over and says that's dangerous. Well, that means dangerous means that you have to pay more attention. It doesn't mean you have to run away, right? That's what it means. The word no means not that way. It doesn't mean you can't do it. It means you can't do it that way. So I used to put on my no buttons. And so
No. N-O, no.
so
I had one that said bullshit.
yeah, good.
I love those.
Yeah. So those are fun. So I think what a fear picture is just no. It's just simply a caution. It's a warning. It has an energy in it. If you can get movement in and find a way to skirt around it, you do fine, right? It's just no problem whatsoever. I don't know how many times I had a friend of mine that was renting a house from me, and he said, I know you told me not to take my dog in the house. I didn't want his dog running through the house. He's got a backyard, it was fenced. I said, you can have your dog back there, but I don't want the dog in the house. And so he says, but the dog had tried to bite someone. I am now have to restrain the dog. And it's odd, the dog's never really bit someone before, but it's an aggressive dog. So I got it on the back laundry room. It's locked in. So if you go by the house, you don't see the dog in the yard, it's in there. I say, okay, I had to do a little plumbing fix. I had a leaky faucet. So the next day I went by and I just totally forgot about the dog being in the laundry room. So I go in the back door, and of course the dog is in there, and the dog is like, "Rrr." and I'm seeing that dog growling at me, and I'm just kind of like, okay, I can match that energy, and I just sat there and I matched the energy. And I says, okay, now I'm just going to take and push it back at you. And the dog just kind of like lit up and hunkered down. And I went around the dog and opened the door, and the dog ran over and ran behind the couch. And I went in, fixed the faucet and everything, went locked up and left him a note saying, I'm sorry when I went in, I forgot about your dog. So he's in the house. And I didn't want to have to drag him out. So I just left him for you to deal with. Uh, he said he had a heck of a time because the dog wouldn't come out from behind the couch. He finally had to move the couch out of the way and go get the dog. A
Oh my
dog's
God.
fear that was throwing at me was defensive. I just reflected it back to him. It's like, I don't want to be scared of a dog. What is this? I'm not going to hurt him. I just hear you can have it back. And he sat in that fear. That was really interesting. When I went by to see the guy weeks later, his dog was kind of cautious a little bit. And I looked at the dog and I said, you better be good. Come on over here. And he come on over and he put his head down. And he stood by me and I petted the top of his head and I said, can we be friends? And so then he went over and sat down and that was it. No more problem. So that's just phenomena. It's like there's no logical piece that you can put into the piece. Just weird stuff that happens. But I was not going to get caught in that dog's fear. It's like it was his fear and he was just being defensive. I got it. Most people have a fear and they're defensive. They're doing the same thing the dog did. And they get caught up in it and they become the fear. If I would have pursued it, the dog would have been aggressive. It would have been growling at me. It would have tried to bite me. It would have done all the things. What am I going to do? Beat him? It's like, that's totally stupid, right? It's like, it doesn't make any sense. So I just had to just push it back at him. Said, here, you want that? You can have it. Don't want it in my world. And then I just went on with fixing my pipe and got the heck out of there. So I think that's the lesson in life. You start to see someone like that. It's just like sometimes you just got to interact with them a little bit, tell them a story, help them out a little bit. And I don't know. I've had, yeah.
Yeah, matching energy. So a quick kind of matching similar experience I had years ago. I was in England and I was in my beautiful, that I'd paid for, that I'd worked very hard for, my beautiful new Mercedes. And her name was Lola and she wasn't a showgirl. Anyway, driving down this country lane that's no wider than my arm. I mean, the roads in England are so tiny, in the country especially. And I'm going downhill and there's a woman in her truck coming uphill, big old woman. And she clipped my window and clipped my mirror, but hers fell off, the Mercedes one. But I ended up parking downhill and now she's parked uphill. And so obviously we get out of our cars because we've had a little bump, And I remember I was dressed for work. I was in a long fake fur coat and a suit and heels. And this woman got out of her truck holding the mirror that had fallen off her car, that my car had bumped off. And she was in kill mode. And she was twice the size I am. And coming down, holding this, this mirror. My first thought was, holy fuck, she's going to kill me, right? And then I was instantly like, okay, Dani, you gotta use your tools here. Now, because I was at a distance of height and, inferior to her because she was coming down the hill, I imagined my energy frequency raising up as high as I could, higher than her. I imagined my energy expanding out. And also in my mind, I'm thinking, right, if she tries to hit me, I'm going to punch her so hard, and I was terrified. And something happened because all of a sudden, the woman who's effing and screaming and going to kill me with her energy stops. And turned around and just got back in her car. I couldn't believe it. I was like, yes, a win for the Henderson. A win for the Henderson. I mean, the fact I got back in my car, I was shaking. I was so scared, but again, I learned those tools from you largely, or you reminded me of them, when I used to come to class with you. It's just amazing, the kind of matching the tools, the things we can do that are non-violent, that people can't see by using energy. On the other side of that, Chris, I had an experience about 2 weeks ago with my friend Elena Danan. She's an archaeologist. She spent many years in Egypt, and we're both fascinated by ancient history and art. And anyway, we met at the British Museum in London, and she was visiting from Ireland, and she's French. And we went to look at the museum. Now, we're the same. I don't want to be bothered in a museum. Like, I'll go with you, but you go do your whatever, and don't come to me until I text you or we plan a time, because I want to enjoy and have my own thoughts. And if I want to connect energetically, I'm gonna do that. I don't want anybody around me. Yeah.
Right.
So I'm going along and I'm downstairs, and I've gone through Egypt. I'm going into Greece, and I have these giant rooms and going through different rooms. And then there are suddenly some reliefs on the wall that have come out of ancient parts of an ancient library in Nineveh, Iraq. And as soon as even before I like properly looked at the reliefs, you could see some of the black smoke. My body starts shaking and responding, and I start crying.
Yeah.
Now, luckily, again, I don't care for audience. I don't care if anyone's there. If I want to wail and cry, I'm gonna do it, whether you're
Yeah.
there or not, because I'm not engaged in
Yeah.
caring what people's responses are. I'm gonna think, oh my God, why is my body, without even really seeing that, without reading the history of that, what is that that's triggering my cellular structure, my frequency, whatever. And I had been saying to Elena for ages, I keep hearing Nineveh, Nineveh, Nineveh. What is Nineveh? And anyway, that year she went to Turkey. Last year she went to Turkey. She went to Nineveh. And so again, she comes back. I keep hearing Nineveh, Nineveh, Nineveh. And it turns out that one of the, like the Great Library of Alexandria burnt down. Well, before that, in ancient Sumer, Mesopotamia, the Library of Nineveh burnt down. Now, where a lot of people go, they would then go, oh, I must have been the great librarian. I don't do that. This is the mistake people make. I'm like, I was probably a little serving girl, I probably picked up people's cups or, whatever. Because as big of a mouth as I have, as outgoing as I am, I don't see myself as that, the queen of Nineveh. But I was just so amazed. And again, it took me by surprise. I wasn't looking for it. And they're the best things to me, those markers, when you're not looking for something.
Right.
But I even moving in the area where these there were real artifacts that have come from Nineveh. They're in the British Museum, and something in that frequency, something unconscious, recognized, and that caused an emotional reaction. How can you explain that to us? What is that?
Well, and that's what I said. That's just a movement of information. And it's okay. Sometimes some people need to have a story. Like you said, some people say, oh, you probably were a librarian there, or some story like that. And that makes them pay more attention, because now you made it personal. But if they pay more attention, then whatever they get out of there, they can be done with. So you can look at that and you can say, well, it could have been a past life experience, or it could have been just that a lot of people got killed there and you just feel the pain of that. Once it's not a logical piece, so we can't just put words onto it that means this. So what we really have to do is we have to recognize it's an experience you're having. You can feel it in your body. So it's like, wow. Then you have to decide what to do with it once you got it in your body, right? So you want to leave it there. You want to send it somewhere else. You want to free it, if whatever that means. It's like, yeah, if you do something with it, now you're being a human. You're taking something that you've learned and you're interacting with it and processing it. That's what life is supposed to be about, right? You go out and you fall in love, or you get mad, or you get drunk, or you get whatever, or you drive too fast, or you get in trouble. All those things are just a process we have to deal with. So some of the stuff is just out there and it influences us. I can't begin to give you a logical answer, because it isn't one, that what that connection is. You're not going to find it in a book. You're not going to be able to measure it with scientific instruments. You're not going to find any of that, and I could take theories and ideas. I could talk about them for hours, because I love those type of things. But I think the simple piece is just to recognize it affected you. I don't know how many times the same thing. I've been in museums around the world. I've been to Troy, I've been all those places, and you're looking at it and you're going, wow, you can feel all that stuff, right? And Troy was particularly interesting in Turkey because the guy that discovered it didn't do it in a scientific manner. He just dug holes, right? Oh, look, I found it. And he just dug holes. Well, all those ancient ruins go in layers. So basically what he did, he corrupted about 20 layers. And so he messed all that stuff up. So it's interesting to me when I went to Troy, I'm standing there and looking back at an area and I'm thinking, this is a mess. I mean, it's just like I could feel my head spinning. It's kind of like I'm looking at some type of an abstract picture that doesn't make any sense. Like Esther, one of those pictures that, you know, doesn't logically, but the whole thing didn't make any sense to me. I'm sitting there looking at it, and one of the guides came over and he said, yeah, this is an example of what happened when the guy just threw all the dirt over here and just corrupted it. And I said, oh, that's what I'm getting. It's like, it did. It felt like I should clean the room. It felt like, you know, it's like, this is not my responsibility to clean this mess up. But the mess had a message, you know, and it's like, there it is. It had a message. It's like, this is a mess. Those were people living there for centuries. They had a life that they lived. And so now you just messed up that whole stream of somebody having an experience called life. And then below them, 80 years before them, there was another whole stream of dirt where people had the dirt just built up. That's it. And it all got messed up. And so it's a phenomena. It's absolutely not real, but the phenomena is real. I could respond to it. I could see it. And I could just say, you know, sorry about that, but that's the way it goes sometimes, you know, it's like, bye, and walked away from that. And I remember going back with my friends and said, hey, did you notice that area over there? And they go, nah, there was nothing to see over there. And I go, oh, okay. I guess there was nothing to see over there. But I picked up on it. And I think that when you pick up on something, you really need to have a conversation with it. It's just offering an information. It's just like saying hello. I can remember when I was a 5-year-old kid, I went to the dump in town, and I wasn't allowed to go too close to the dump because of rats, whatever scary thing that was. So I'm up the edge of the dump, and I see a chair out there, and the chair was sitting in that dump, and it was a beat up old chair, but it looked like a throne chair, you know, like a king would sit on a throne. That's what it looked like. And like I said, it was just a piece of trash. It was beat up. And I'm looking at that chair, and all of a sudden I see a little glow around it. And I'm thinking, oh, wow, that's kind of interesting. I'm 5 years old. It's like, And I said to the light, what do you do? And all of a sudden I see the light lift up and float up above the chair. And it said, I hold form. I go, I hold form. And it is just released. And I'm going like, oh, I hold form. So that means the artist or the manufacturer or whatever put energy in that chair making it, probably 50 years before, and it was holding form. The energy that was put into it, like any artwork, was holding form. And now it was in a dump. And when I looked at it and we got a communication, it just basically said, I hold form. I'm no longer necessary. It just left. And the chair, and I remember weeks later, it just looked like the chair was now just totally crumbling into itself. It's just like, it just holds form. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. One time I was walking along there was a bunch of houses. We were at a summer camp. And I was walking along one of the houses, they were independent little buildings. Well, there were 4 units in a building, and one of them had burned down. So the remains of it was burned down, and there was a little rope around there. That was before yellow tape. But I'm walking along, all of a sudden I hear somebody screaming. And I got to kind of shake my head. I'm maybe 6 years old, and I'm kind of like, wow. And then I got to like listen, but listen, right? You know, that you go the next step down below listening, right? So I listen, and I hear them screaming. So I look at this area that's fenced off, and I know I'm not allowed to go in there, even as a 6-year-old, but I don't care about rules. So I'm looking at that. And in those days, we didn't have a refrigerator. We had an ice chest. You put ice in on the sides to keep stuff cold. There's an ice chest and furniture and stuff all burnt and cindered and all just debris in that mess. And I see that ice chest sitting in there. So I go, wow, it's weird. So I climb over the debris, work my way into there, open an ice chest. When I open it, there's a little girl sitting in there. And she looks at me, she screams, and she takes off running. It's like, wow. So had I not paid attention to the scream, she would have just been a statistic. She went over there playing, but she wasn't supposed to be. She was younger. And she got into the ice chest and the door closed and she can't open from the inside. So I saved her life. Of course, you know, not a big thing, but it just was, I heard the scream. And she was, yeah. So it's like, I don't know. Where do you explain it? That's once again, I had a lifetime full of phenomena because I would stop, pause, and pay attention. Someone else walking by would say, oh, I don't see anything screaming. I don't hear anything. And you just keep going. She would have been dead. So it's just, and, you know, who knows what the little girl experience was. I never actually ever saw her or talked to her again. It was a camp. People would come there for weekends. So it's like, but yeah, most certainly it was a dangerous thing for her to do. She shouldn't have been in the ruins, but then I also endangered my life by saving her. Right. It's
Amazing, amazing. And that's a physical happenstance. And like I say, other things when you feel energy around. Today, I was with my sister and we left this ancient church and we're walking down in a wooded area. And she said to me, if we go through this back wilderness area, there's an old hotel through there. I went, oh, let's go and have a look. So we start walking through. And as we come into the clearing, and I can see the hotel maybe 500 yards away from me, I suddenly start to feel all kinds of emotions. And I said to my sister, and it's a gorgeous, beautiful, massive, wide hotel. And I said to her, oh my God, I said, I believe that this at one point was used as a hospital or convalescence or something. I
right.
said, because I could feel everything. My
Right.
heart was pounding. And I'm saying to her,
Right.
my heart is pounding. Anyway, this man comes out of the hotel. He went, we're closed, hotel sold. We're closed. We're renovating. It will be open in 1 year. Sorry, we forgot to shut the gate that you came through. And I said to him, I felt all kinds of energy frequency. I said, was this ever a convalescence or a hospital? He went, no, no, no. It went, oh, no, it was. It was. He said, but, and he looked at me and then he got annoyed. And he goes, yeah, but that was in the 1600s. I said, it doesn't matter. I said, I feel and I see the layers of time.
Right.
I always have been able to.
Right.
And he said, yes. He said it was a place where lepers, it was a leprosy healing. They used that building for lepers, right? 1600, year 1600. And then I said, so I said, it's probably one or two little spirits still wandering around. And then he got mad again. His
Yeah.
field changed again to
Right.
protection and defense. And I said to him, I didn't say they were bad spirits. He went, well, I've been here 50 years. This is my family's hotel. We've had it for hundreds of years. And I went, it's okay. It's okay. We're
Yeah.
leaving. So let's go.
So you hit it. That's what people do. If he would have related to the energy, it would have just dissipated. But here he is keeping it alive because he's got his energy making it a war. Every day he's beating it, right? And he's probably affected in his health by that animosity that he's been carrying. He's not getting along with the history of the hotel. And so, yes, that's a phenomenon. He's not going to be able to touch it. But if he would walk in and respect it and do a healing on it, he could probably get ownership of the place. Obviously, he had it for 50 years. He probably struggled every day and hated going to work. And now he's sold it and he thinks it's great, but he's still going to have to deal with his animosity, which you already saw as a pattern that shows up when somebody brings up a reality, right? And that's just very, very normal, just really completely normal. And yeah, I've seen people already that we do a healing on someone in a hospital and they're laying there and we just go in and we would do a little bit of healing work. And when their energy was ready to move on, and we just move them on and it would pass. And then the next thing I know, some family member said, I saw you kill my mother. I'm going to sue you.
Oh
Like,
my God.
okay. I said, But one thing you need to think about before you sue me, if I had the power to kill your mother, do you understand you're in trouble? And he's kind of looking at me.
That's That's so you.
You see, you could turn it around on him, right? It's like, yeah, if anything, he probably killed his mother because of his attitude all his life, right? I don't know where his
Oh my,
animosity came from, but he wanted to blame somebody all his life, obviously. So,
wow.
so I don't know.
There's two ladies, 2 years ago I used to think, when we're wondering what's our life going to look like, what road are we going to go down, and I've realized there's like tons of different roads that you go down, and you play in different arenas and systems
Right.
and games. And I wondered if years ago my role was going to be something to do with voluntary euthanasia. So the person, when their compos mentis, decides whether they want to stay or go, or for whatever reason, whether they're very sick and they don't want to suffer or have their family, whatever the reason. Well, 2 friends of mine, they're twins, and they're 94 years old. They unfortunately took the jib jab job and suffered horrors from day one.
Yeah.
They're very wealthy ladies, very beautiful, very healthy, but they were both suffering dreadfully. So over the last little while, the last, I would say 6 weeks, both have decided to go home to spirit, to source.
Right.
And so they took, under the guise of a medical doctor, a cocktail that allowed them to leave the body. I forget exactly why I'm going here now, but it is quite the phenomena. And one went first, and then the other one went after, like some weeks after. But that choice, that leaving, whereas you were saying about the guy that accused you of killing his mother, what you're doing, you are enabling energetically the field and also supporting the wishes of the person with the soul, right? And I remember you taught us years ago, part of our becoming an ordained reverend in the state of California, you taught us how to read last rites.
Right.
And I got to do last rites on a dear friend of ours, Dr. Mayo Soro Espinoza. And I got to do last rites on her in her bed. And she was suffering, as you remember, from horrendous very aggressive brain cancer. And she'd asked us to do it. And then there was 2 other ladies, Eloise and Grace, and we were there supporting our friend Mayu. And I don't know whether I've mentioned this in any of our other broadcasts, maybe, I don't remember. But it was such an honor. It was such an honor and so humbling. I loved her so much, as you know, and I know you did.
Yeah.
But to be part of her exit journey, what an honor that is.
Yes.
And so we did the last rites, and then her daughter called me and said to me, Mum won't leave. She's scared to leave. And as you know, Mayu was captured by the German Nazis, went through concentration camps, and was tortured beyond all imagination, along with her family. And at the end now of her life, and her daughter's called, and daughter's asking for help. So I called Grace and Eloise and say, right, we're going to meet in the dream space tonight at 2 a.m. We were all in England at the time. No, we were all in America. We were all in California. So we're going to meet at 2 a.m. in California, Pacific time, and we're going to assist our beloved. And I don't know what that's going to look like, but so the 3 of us made an agreement. Yeah. And then I remember so clearly in a dream, seeing Mayu standing in front of me with her back to me, and in front of her was a black meshing, like black net curtains, and behind that was the brightest light I've never seen. And then I'm aware of Eloise beside me here, and I'm aware of an image of Grace on this side, but I know that Eloise's energy is stronger. And without even talking to each other, we gently held Mayu's back, and we gently pushed her into the light. And as I got close, something told me, you can't go there, that this is not for you. And so she went into the light. And I remember speaking to our old friend Michael Berger a day or 2 after that, and him saying, you guys went up to the veil, like you went up to the veil, like you helped her through the veil. Now, whether that's true or not in reality, I don't know, but something of a phenomena occurred. Mm-hmm. And then our beloved passed, Mayu passed away, you know. Was that murdering her? No, that was assisting her on her exit journey. And, you know, and she chose us, she asked us, and it's, again, what an honor, right?
Right. Yeah, she was a sweet lady. She left a massage table and a few things to us when she had passed. Um, her greatest achievement in life for her, she said she was an artist and she would do artwork. And so she did an artwork because her country had been taken over, yes, and she was in a prison camp and grew up in a prison camp as a kid. Her father actually committed suicide in the camp. Um, and she made a piece of art to demonstrate peace. And so that was her attempt to end it. And she was working on her PhD thesis. And so she said to me, I did all this work and what I'm trying to prove, it don't work. And I said, you're missing something here. You're trying to make it all come out a certain way. You're missing the truth. The truth is that you took somebody else's scientific information, you did tests on it, and it don't work. So that's what your thesis is. I did tests on these and it didn't work. And it's like, so she wrote it all up and she got her PhD. So that was her
Amazing
reward in life. And right after she got her PhD is when the brain cancer came in and she fell in the shower. And so it was like, that would pretty much, between the Peace Prize and it getting that acknowledgement, allowing to do that as an artist, and then the fact that she got her PhD, is kind of like, that was an accomplishment she felt. She was in nursing. So that was an accomplishment that she felt that finally she had accomplished in life. And at that point, it was like, I don't want to be an invalid, she said. I worked with invalids all my life. I don't want to be an invalid. And so, yeah, she was done. And it's really sweet to recognize that and recognize it's like, there's nothing else on my agenda. I've completed everything. Just so nice for someone to be able to sit there and say, I'm good with this, right? And it just be able to step out. Very peaceful way to go.
So peaceful. You know what else happened? This is crazy. So for years, I couldn't remember where she lived. I just couldn't. I couldn't find the address in my head. It was Lacadia somewhere. Couldn't find it. When my Jeff was alive, and you met my Jeff, my fiance, who sadly passed, because he came to classes that you and Deb were giving. Anyway, I'm sitting there at the table in our dome home, me and Jeff, and all of a sudden, I shit you not, her address appears. Her address appeared on my laptop. And I said to Jeff, oh my God, that's Mayu's address. And she died, 10, 12 years ago now at this stage?
Yeah.
I also haven't been able to get hold of her children. They were older than me. They're older than me, her grown-up kids, and who I'd obviously spent some time with. And I'm sitting there and saying to Jeff, oh my God, this is Mayu's address. I'm like, I'm going to get in the car. This is Mayu. I'm not going to ignore this. And I got in the car and I drove to her house and I found her house. And you'll never guess, her son opened the front door and her daughter was coming back from a jog. And I'm standing there between her two kids. And I'm like, guys, I don't know if you remember me. And they did remember me. And then I said, your address popped up. This is your mother. And I'm telling you, I just followed the call and here I am. And then her daughter said to me, because as you know, you mentioned, did her beautiful artworks, and she'd use plaster of Paris.
Right.
And she'd make like hands together, or she had a mask people would model. Well, she did plaster of Paris of her legs from like the knees down. Did you know that?
No.
Did you ever see that?
Yeah.
Her daughter said to me, come and look at this. Now, my last memory of my beautiful friend was her lying in the hospital bed in her house, in the living room, dying.
Right.
And she just raised a very weak hand as I left. And I knew that would be the last time I see her. So here I am. I step into the living room, and in the corner are my friend's legs and her beautiful, shapely, Rubenesque legs. And it was so amazing to see that, Chris.
Yeah.
And it was like she had dominance, which she didn't have when she was alive. There was a dominance, there was an energy, she was in that room. It was such a beautiful experience. So like, there's no way to explain that level of phenomena, is there?
No. So if you look at the blessing, spending that time in that prison camp, and she said, all kinds of things happened, but she said, to my knowledge, I was never raped. She said they were beating people, they were doing all kinds of things because they would find stuff stolen. So they would think us kids stole it, right? And so they would slap us around and beat us up and stuff. But she said it's just like it was very interesting in that when she finally got out of that camp, I don't know if you recall, but her and her mother and the family and her mother, his father committed suicide. They wound up finding the place, some like in Texas, they found a chicken coop they rented and they cleaned it out. The chickens had all died anyhow. They cleaned it out, and actually the first place they got in the United States to live was a chicken coop. And they lived in a chicken coop for a while. You know, enduring all that makes you really suave to threats are like meaningless, right? So her relationship to all that was she could bring art or grace or beauty to anything, no matter what it was, because that was her safeguard. That was her sanity. And so that was her charm. And she was just such a fun lady. I remember I was doing a psychic event one time and had readers out there, and I was in front of that hair salon and renting the space. They had a little courtyard, and I used that space. And she came on over and she said, I can do this. And I said, great. You want to do this? Go do a reading. Go sit down, do it. And she said, well, I don't want to come in on your show. She said, no, this is not my show. This is your show. You showed up. Sit down. Go ahead. You know, one of these people will come over and get a reading from them. And she was over there doing some readings with people. And then she came over and she said, well, thank you. That was really fun. I haven't done that for a while. And I said, yeah, it's just like, you know, hang out, come around. You know, it's like, whatever. She had taken some type of classes somewhere. I don't know, whatever it was. It didn't matter. She was good. She's just like, and so it was fun just interacting. And she was surprised that I would let her just come in and do that. But like, why not? Right. I mean, it's, once again, it's just, we got to find a way to get it all to connect, to weave together. I'm not going to do it overnight. And, you know, but I think that the more we can talk about it, the more that we can start to put this out as an agenda. It's kind of like going forward. We just really need to have more of those connections. Right now, the natural tendency is we're still in the process of disconnecting from a lot of the old stuff that were the rules. And as we start to move back into connecting, we're looking for new links. And I think we need to not turn away. I think we need to attend to those possibilities. We need to look at them, and we need to be able to, you know, and you know, look how I can remember with Jeff, we had conversations, and it's kind of like, gosh, he was such a sweet guy. And it's just like, I can remember talking to him and thinking, you know, yeah, whatever that was bearing on him was horrendous. And it's almost like he felt it was his responsibility to carry that load. I have no idea why. And I talked to him and I said, you need to let this go, you know, and he says, I can't, you know, I got to make this all work. And I go, you know, dude, sometimes when you see something and you become aware of something, it doesn't mean it's your responsibility to make it work. You need to just say, okay. And that's where he stuck. He got stuck on that piece of thinking he had to figure it all out. He had an agenda, he had a plan, he had a vision forward. And it's almost as if, you know, he couldn't weigh it all out. The kids, the this, the house, the property, it's like, oh my goodness. It's like, how do I package it all in one package? That's what he was always trying to do, make it all one package. He had connections. Everybody loved him because of the fact that he brought it all together. But it wasn't something that was a demand on him. A lot of people think this is a demand. It's an opportunity. Just like the guy that you talked to at that rest home or the hotel. You didn't have to solve any problems. You just noticed something and talked to him. And he had animosity because he didn't want you to bring it up, because he didn't want to see it. But yet he's been fighting it all his life. So it's like, he was crazy. He should have just looked at it and had a conversation with you. Would have been fine, right? He's already sold the place.
Right, exactly. And now he's going to help like develop it. So he's still stuck with that energy, and they're going to be changing things and shifting whatever energy is still there. That obviously there's still energy there because I felt it. I felt it. I saw the imagery. I could tell exactly what that building was at one point down the timeline that does connect to him because it came up as an opportunity, as you said earlier, for energy to say hello. We can
Yeah.
wrap it up into a spark of color or a communication verbal or a physical manifestation. And again, for people looking at the clairvoyant, clairsentient, claircognizant, clairaudient, it doesn't matter what system you put it into, something is happening, and you can either attend to it and train with it, acknowledge it or not. It's a choice, right?
Right. Yes. And I think people need to step up and recognize that. And I had company for Christmas. One of my students from Topeka, she had a week off, and from her company where she works. So she called me and she said, I got a week off. I don't know where to go. And I said, well, come on out and sleep on my couch. So she flew out here and she stayed for a week. And we were sitting around talking, and we were going to see waterfalls and all that kind of stuff that you do in Washington State. But it was a little rainy, and so it wasn't, like we didn't spend the whole day out hiking around because of the rain. And so we'd come back, and I just cooked dinner, and we just got done eating it, and we were sitting around and just having a little dialogue. And then the neighbor knocks on my door, and he's having a domestic quarrel. And so he comes in and sits down, and we spent the next hour working with him. So it's like, and it was so interesting because he got up and left and went back, and it's just like, and we went back into our conversation, and then she said the next day, she said, it was like all of a sudden you just integrated that in to like it was all part of what we were doing, and then it just flowed back out again. I said, yeah, I could have told him, hey, go back into my office, we'll sit down, we'll talk this through. He's having a fight with his wife, and he came over to see me, and it's like because she's strong-headed, and she is, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's the way it is. So I said, you got in a relationship knowing who she is, and she's strong-headed, so don't get all pissy about that, you dummy. You got to figure out how to work with her. That's what you got to do, right? But she wants the last word. Okay, fine. That was the terms of the agreement, fool. So let her have the last word. Say, how can I help you? What can I do for you? What do you want me to do? Right? Let her have the last word. Like, you're going forward. And he's kind of like, wow, why worry about my son? No, you don't have to worry about your son. You need to talk to your son tomorrow and say, this is normal stuff. People have arguments. You in your life are going to have arguments with people. Pay attention to what's happening. We don't hate each other. We don't have to kill each other. We just have disagreements. People have disagreements. We should learn from them. So tell your son, if you see anything that I'm doing wrong or mom's doing wrong, you come and tell me so that we have a chance to change it. It's like, wow.
Yeah.
So we integrated the boy into it. It's like, and that's what I suggested he do. And so, yeah, it's kind of like, he's just a neighbor. It's like, so it all worked out fine. We all just kind of sat there, and it's kind of, she goes, she says she had been in a job before where she was a boss, and she had all these people making mistakes, and she was trying to fix it all. And then she finally got stressed and she quit that job. She took a year off, and now she's working in a job where she's not the boss. She's one of the people and doing the work. She's an analyst, and she's doing this work. And she said, I'm now learning to get along with these people. When I was the boss, I'd be looking at them and I could see all the problems. Now I'm one of them, and I see all the problems, and I'm going over. I said, you could do that more than one way. And I just kind of share thoughts with them. And now I'm not the boss, so they don't have to do it my way. And some of them say, thank you. And some of them say, nah, I like the way it is. It's all fine. It doesn't matter. So she said, it was really nice seeing you talk to that man for an hour. And it's kind of like, I started realizing, oh my God, I'm doing that. I'm doing that with all these people I'm working with. You know, I'm the oldest person in there because you're all young people out of college that are in their 20s. And here she says, here I am, 40 some years old. I'm the old person, right? But she says, you know, just being able to play with them and bounce things around with them, I recognize that I'm developing my skills of being able to get along with people better. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, so, you know, that's the message I try to impart. I mean, I came up through conflict. I've done a lot of things. I was in law enforcement for a while, trying to get into use my degree in psychology to get into criminology. Um, I talked to serial killers. I've done all kinds of that kind of stuff, and it's just kind of like recognize that to be able to get any information out of them, I had to build a little rapport with them, and they're not people you really want to be nice to, um, and start to. But I need to close cases. I needed to, you know, these people kill people. They want to close a case. They want to be done with it. The family wants to know what happened, right? So it's like, so that was my job, and I just spent hours talking to these people. I was glad they were, you know, chained to the floor, but because they were not nice. But I couldn't be fearful, so I had to have some level. I didn't want to be friendly because I didn't want to be deceptive. So it's kind of like, I don't approve of what you did, but talk to me a little bit. I want to find out what motivated you. I I have been really pissed at people, but I'm not really mad enough to kill them. It's like I can't imagine
Yeah.
why all of a sudden you'd find that fun or charming or exciting or sexy or anything like that. It's like I don't get that. So I can't judge you as wrong. Talk to me. What's going on? And we became quote unquote friends because of that. And because of that, they started telling me where they buried bodies, and I closed cases. You know, and it's like, so those are real experiences that you have that to me is like, there's no reason that there's nothing in it for them to tell me. They're already in prison. You know, you're gonna spend a life in prison, or you're gonna get death sentence, or whatever you're gonna get in prison. They're not gonna gain anything talking to me. So I had nothing to lose. I just decided I'm not gonna make this an argument. I'm not gonna walk out of here feeling like I've just been stressed. I'm just gonna make it friendly. I don't want to be their buddy, but I can make it friendly, right? That's what I did. And I remembered when I was a psychology student eons ago, I had a guy that worked in a prison system as a psychologist, and he had two kids, and they lived on the grounds where the prison was. And there was a guy that escaped from the prison. He was on the grounds. He didn't get out into the public, but he had escaped from the containment. And the guy had actually killed children. And his two kids were out playing, and they found this guy hiding in the bushes. And they talked him down and talked him into turning himself in. Because even though they could see, they're little kids, but they're like 8, 9, 10 years old, girl and boy. They could see that he was messed up, but they didn't let that stop them. They didn't run from fear. They just realized they got to deal with it, and they dealt with it, and they talked him down, and they brought him back in, and he turned himself back in.
Wow.
And so his father said, you know, I'm amazed at your kids. You've done a really good job. So some of that working with that energy rubbed off on the kids, and they started understanding he was a really good teacher, and it was a great story. Yeah.
Oh, wow. You know, if we go back a little bit to you working with serial killers, I remember you sharing this during my training. And it's so incredible that, that whatever it was, however you did it, whether it was deliberate or not, conscious or unconscious, you somehow found a level to get them to entrain with you, to match energy with you, to maybe they felt something like, wow, this man is listening to me. Because you know, again, this is 20 odd years ago now that you and I were in class, well, you were the teacher of the classes I attended. I mean, you are a badass. I mean, you are. I mean, you always reminded me of a big old truck driver or a wizard, you know, something in between. You know what I mean? Because, and you know, quite a muscular guy, and you're tall. And you kind of look like you could kick anybody's ass. I mean, that's a fact. But you also have this energetic frequency. I can't put it into words. It's too much to, it's just
Right.
not possible. But I love that, I'm sure the men that you sat with, the serial killers that are killed and killed and killed and killed and killed, obviously got an adrenal high from that murderous point. You're right. They would have kept something that would give them some kind of a pleasure, knowing that they didn't have to tell the parents where their children were buried or, whatever, whoever. But something in you undid that.
Right.
You undid that. And so your work, the benefit of you having all these different careers, fireman, psychologist, the teacher, karate teacher, oh my God, the things you've done are just amazingly fascinating. What do you think that is? If we could quantify that a little bit, and then again, that others can look at their own ability to emote, to help.
Well, I would do something in life and I would be doing it and I'm having a good time doing it. And then all of a sudden someone comes in and says, oh, we're going to do this way, we're going to do that. And I said, okay, talk to me about it, and it's kind of like, blah, 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 I'm the boss. And I said, I don't need this. Go on. I was never out of work for more than a week in my life. It's just like, so I just went out and found another job, right? It's like, so I walk in the door and they said, well, you need these certificates. Can you run a forklift? Can you do that? Yeah, I can do all that stuff. I didn't know how to do it, but I did it. So you just show up. I think that you have to be open to, right? And then when you show up, you don't become arrogant. You show up and say, I haven't done this for a while. Could you help me here? Right? I had a student that came here for the house for several weeks one time. He's now passed on, but he said he was in college and he had to get a job. So a construction company was down and they were building houses. And so he went in and he said, I'm looking for a job and I'm a student in daytime. They said, well, at nighttime we sheetrock. He said, so if you know how to sheetrock, you can. Now he had done a little work as a framer. And so he said, oh yeah, I've done sheetrocking. And not a whole lot, but I've done some, no problem. He said, well, we'll try you out. So that way you can work nights. Well, what he did after he talked about that, he came up that night. He wasn't starting yet. He came by that night to see one of the guys that was working. So he come in, he said, hey, I just hired from the company and they hired me as a sheetrocker. And I thought I'd come in and see kind of like how you guys do it. I've done a little bit of it, but see how you do it. And there's this old timer in there that was in there working and he was just really throwing it up and plastering and really just going to town and talking at the same time. So he didn't pause. He just kept working, and he could smell the booze on the guy. And so he goes, God, it's just like I'm up kind of late. I think I'm going to go get a drink. Do you like bourbon? And the guy says, yeah. So he says, I went out and got a pint of bourbon, came back with it and opened it up. And I took a sip and passed it to him. And we're passing a bottle of bourbon back and forth. And the guy is explaining to me how to do this right and everything. He said, that bottle of bourbon got me an hour class. And he said, so when I started, everything I knew, I learned in that hour over a bottle of bourbon. And this guy was really a sweet guy. When he came in for class, he was in the middle of divorce. He was in the middle of losing a job. He had been injured because a piece of machinery blew up in his face. So he'd gone through some really nasty surgery and stuff. So he had a really tough time, and he was very, very frustrated with life and the end of the relationship and all blah, blah, blah. And he showed up in class and we're taking class. And it's kind of like, as we processed through that class, all of a sudden he realized that, oh, why is he fighting? Everything is an argument. Why is he fighting? Right? And so I'm talking to him. He says, like my parents, I don't talk to them. My old man, he told me, go in the service, get out of here. I'm a pain in the ass. It's like, and I've had, I don't know how many relationships and they all dump me. What the hell? So I tell him, why don't you have a weekend off? Why don't you go back and visit your family? And he goes, my mother and father. I said, yeah, before they die. Why don't you go visit them? He said, you don't have to be nice. You don't have to get along. Just go visit them. You need the experience. He said, I went back and my mother and father were like a couple of teenagers in love. They were all kissy face and all that. And here they are, these damn old people, all just being all lovey-dovey. And I'm saying, gosh, I just remember them arguing all the time. And then all of a sudden the light goes on. I was such a jerk. I was creating conflict. My dad was right. He threw me out because I was destroying his relationship. Mom was trying to defend me, and I was just pissy. And so he said, I got to say, I love you guys, and I apologize for being a jerk. I brought tears to their eyes, right? But he came back to class, and it's like his whole life changed after that. So he actually settled into a relationship in Utah and was there for quite a few years, went up from being just a framer in a company to being an executive in that company. And so the last time I talked to him before he died, he said, I finally lost my hammer. And I said, because we used to joke about his hammer. He lost it and find it and lose it and find it. And so he said, I had this hammer for years. I kept losing it and finding it, losing and finding it. He said, I finally lost my hammer. I said, you did? Normally you find it. He said, well, they gave me a promotion. I don't need it. So I don't have to go look for it anymore. So he says, now I carry golf clubs around. So he said, I'm regional director. So it's interesting, right? You can find those elements of accomplishments if you kind of go with it and let it unfold. It's not something you just got to let it unfold. You got to go experience it. You got to get in the water to learn to swim, right? And that's it. So I was never afraid of trying something. Some things I was good at, some things I was horrible at, like whatever. But I did them, right? Some of them I did for a couple of years, some of them shorter time, and that's, I think that's, to me, I never look back on a failure. I learned this, I learned that, I learned this, I learned, hey, that wasn't any fun, I'm not gonna do that anymore. I learned all those things, and it's like, yeah. And I think we need to engage in life and feel the energy of it, get involved, get our hands against it, get in contact with it, see what that does and what it has to tell us, because it's just enriching. The BS, and come on, I think there's every 90 minutes there's another book published. It's like, it's totally insane, right? So when you start to look at all the data we've got in this data world, it's not about data at this point. It's about your interaction with the data and the world. And what do you get out of that? Because you can't read all those books and be wise. The wisdom's going to come from you touching it, you interacting with it, you being able to sit with it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. One of the questions I get asked the most is, what's my mission? Dani, tell me what my mission is. And I'm like, well, that's not going to happen. I'm not going to tell you what your mission is. And then so many people, they're locked into, I have to know my mission. Am I a starseed? Am I an alien? Am I, because, I do a lot of work on that, in that realm too. But here's an example. Yesterday, I was out and I'd driven through a village and it had a crystal store. And I wanted to go have a look. It was closed. It's not open till spring. So I'm like, bollocks. So anyway, so I'm wandering around this land because I'm so naughty. There's a sign that says private. I'm like, why is that private? Can't help it. Anyway, so I start walking around this farm in the middle of nowhere. It's freezing cold. And I see these two little buildings and there's people in there. And they're doing something, and I can't quite see what they're doing. But as I walk towards the building, I get hit by energy, like a woo, like a high pitch. I'm like, oh, wow, resonance. And I'm like, oh, wow, there's activity here. So anyway, so I go inside this building, and it turned out to be, it's called an armory. These men are making ancient armory. They've got some actual original helmets and, the Red Cross from the old English Crusaders. And so this place is jumping with all kinds of timelines and energy and everything else. And then the guy comes out the back. He's a white guy. He had dreadlocks and a big kind of T-shirt thing around his head because he's got so much of the dreadlocks. He's wearing the smithy, the farrier, the blacksmith leather. And this man was so full of energy and excitement, and he oozed the passion, the love for the work that he's doing. And he played it down. And I went, mate, you own it. You own it. He goes, well, me and my partner. I went, you are so living what you love to do. And he was showing me the swords. They had ancient swords in there. And it was just amazing to see that you got that this man, he was an individual. His hair had been growing for absolutely years. You know what I mean? And then here he was, he's found his groove, he's found his thing, and it's so out of the norm. to what people would judge or look at. But the joy and the happiness, we don't get there until we try different things, until we can let go of what your mum or your dad or your boyfriend, your lover thinks you should do. You know, when we're restrained by someone or something, then people go, oh, yeah, well, you don't have a mortgage. You don't know what I have. You know, people judge all the time. You don't know what anybody has, right? So be quiet. But, you know, if you're going to moan and complain, fine, just go in the corner and do that. Or are you going to sit back and go, do you know what? We could all be dead tomorrow. You know, why don't we just jump in? Why don't we try this? Why don't we try that? Why don't we just take the kids on a holiday now? Or whatever it's going to be, right? Engage in that frequency.
Yes. So I think that's the secret. I think that's in everybody. If you can interact with them, if you can have a moment with them, no matter what. I was a kid, and it was summertime, and I was going to a park, and walk up the street, and there was one street that had traffic on. I had to cross, so I was being mindful. So I'd stop and I'd look around, and there was a bus bench here, and there was this old guy sitting on a bus bench. He's probably not as old as I am now, but he was an old guy. And I was maybe 14 or something. And I look at him, and he just sitting there. And then all of a sudden I think, it's Sunday. It's Sunday, and the buses don't run. I wonder if that old guy knows the buses don't run today. So I walk over to him, and he's just kind of staring out. So I go, well, I just sat down next to him. And he said, what you doing, boy? And I said, well, it's Sunday. You know, the buses don't run on Sunday. And he goes, oh. And I said, you like this bench? He said, yeah, I like watching all the kids and everything over there play, and I can sit here and watch. I said, that's kind of cool. You know, tell me a little bit. Did you do that when you were a kid? Play on swings and stuff? And then he starts to tell me a story. He was British. And so when he was a kid, you had to go into the military. So he's telling me he had to be on a ship, right? So he said, he said, you didn't wear shoes on the ship because it was hard on the wood. So you ran around barefoot on the ship. And you had to learn to tie ropes and get up and sails and all that. He said here when he was 14 and 15 and 16, he was on a ship. It was in the Navy for the British. And he says, so I had a pair of boots, but they were by the door, by the gangplank. So the only time we get them is they'd hand us to us when we go off the boat, and we could put them on and walk down the gangplank, and then we could go to town. If we come back, we had to take them off because on the ship we didn't. And he was telling me stories, and all these stories and all this kind of going on. And we just got so engrossed in it. It was just really, really fun. I went back and I was telling my mother about it, and she was kind of like, you know, like, whatever. She said, you shouldn't bother people. I said, no, bother people. You're not listening to me, right? I'm not bothering somebody. I just had a conversation with someone. So anyway, it was really, I would have never known this, but probably about 2 months later, my mother saw in a paper that an old guy died on a bus bench. And she brought it to my attention. She said, she remembered. She said, you remember telling me a story about you talked to an old guy on a bus bench? She said, I saved this picture in the paper. She used to read the paper every day. And was that the guy? And I go, oh my God, it is. You know, and I never thought in terms of he was there, says he was so alone in life is why he was there, right? And he had nothing. And I went over and talked to him, and I don't know, it's like, whatever. It was a nice interchange. It was, but you know, he had said, oh, his kids were grown up and his wife had passed, and here he was just sitting there, and he has all these stories and no one to share it with. And it was like, wow. So it was fun. I just felt like I got privileged. Like I knew the secret that nobody knew, because now he's passed and now nobody will know, right? And it's just like, that's always sat with me. It's like, yeah, I really just, somebody shares their secret, their meaning of life, their desire for life. It's like, that is very precious. And that's just like, wow, you know? So I can remember just kind of tears in my eyes when I was sitting here, my mother showing me the picture. I go, well, and she rattled off his name, and I'm going, that, I mean, it doesn't matter what his name was. Don't matter, right? He's gone. But there it was. And he had a whole lifetime. It was like, it was just such an adventure. It was like, you know, going to the movies, or like your adventure, all this armory. It was like all that was going through my fantasy as he talked about his adventures at sea as a kid. And I'm thinking, oh my God, my age, and he was at sea on a ship in the Navy. Like, wow, that's just so bizarre, right?
So
Different times.
amazing.
Yeah.
Mm. Well, again, what a gift that he got to sort of engage, connect, and train, be with the frequency of, felt
Yeah.
listened to, felt seen, felt heard, and then passed that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. Well, Dr. Chris, we could continue for more hours, of course, you and I. We always have plenty to share, and I love to bring you on my channel. I love to share you and your experiences, and so many people are on their journey, and they're listening better than before. I think more of the ego in some is quite lowered now. They don't all want to be the greatest healer in the world or the next Archangel Michael, or they just want to know how to get through and how to experience, So
Yeah.
let's leave some last thoughts. What would you like to share with the audience that will see this?
Uh, I think that you need to move. You need to go for walks. You need to look around and say hi to people. You really need to make that an agenda. I think that's one of the healthiest things you can do. I know they talk about you should work 20 minutes a day or whatever. I'm saying spend that 20 minutes hiking and talk to someone, interact with someone. The neighbors go by, I talk to them all, I wave at them. They say, "Oh, nice yard." I said, "Thank you very much," but we interact. So they all know me, right? And it's like that brings a sense of community into it. You can hugely, in our automatic world with our head in a phone and watching television and all this other Facebook and stuff, there's no human interaction. We need and thrive on human interaction. That AI interaction doesn't pass it. So we really need to get another person. We need to get them, and somebody's grouchy, you just say, "Hi, how are you today?" Excuse me, I'm sorry I asked. I see you're having a bad day, and just like, and that makes them smile. It's like, whatever. That I think is really healthy for you, and it brings you wisdom, because then you start to be able to see all those things we're talking about, because now you're looking. And yes, you won't know how to frame it or how to talk about it. It's just like too crazy. But you're having the experience, and that enriching you, because now your energy starts to expand. You're more dynamic in the world. You have more of a presence. People don't doubt you. People don't distrust you. You just are there for them. That's it. And that makes the world a better place. I think we got to do our part to make it a better place. That's it, right? Someone, I've got X amount of time left, so somebody's got to step up and take over. Yeah.
There's only ever going to be one Dr. Chris Lemmon, my love, and that's the role that you took, and that's who you be. And you're a blessing. And thank you again, Chris, for being here, for sharing your great wisdom,
Thank you.
sharing your stories.
Yeah.
And thank you, sir. And to you guys out there watching, Dr. Chris and I have at least 4 other broadcasts on my channel, different subjects, different layers of the cake that we're all eating on this planet right now. So feel free to go and look at other broadcasts and let us know what you think of this. And if you guys have a particular subject that you would like Dr. Chris to come on and share his wisdom and insight, and then go ahead and ask us. And so until then, Dr. Chris, good night, my love. And to you guys out there, my name is Dani Henderson. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you soon.
Right. Thank you.
All right. All right. Excellent. We are clear. Wow, that was over an hour and a half, I think. Oh my God, and that was nearly 2 hours. That went so quick.
Yes.
Holy shit.
I talk too much.
No, you don't. No, you don't talk too much. You definitely don't. Wow, there was some great nuggets there. It's not also just so much what we're saying in the words, it's all the layering in between and the intention. And I really feel that. I really, really do.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, I figured we needed to get a little more. I get a little heady sometimes, so it's kind of fun to be able to get a little more into the energy of it and be able to talk about that, because that's an essential component. If that's not there, then you're just a book cover, right? And so you got to play it. No, I did enjoy your book. I most certainly did, and it was like, and I felt really so bad in the chapter on Jeff. It's like, oh my goodness, he was such a sweet guy. I remember telling you, you're going to break your heart, right? Remember? And it's like, because I just, I just could not, just couldn't get him to let go of whatever that pattern it was that he's got to take care of everything. And it's like, God, you can't do this, man. You gotta figure out what's important to you and go with it. I think he was trying, but it's just like, gosh, it's really, really tough changing a pattern, just changing that. And it's just like all his life, he was looking for that vitality, but he didn't think he was feeling it. But he was. And he reflected it. And yeah, so when I read that chapter in your book, it brought a tear to my eyes, and I says, "Oh yeah, that's very sad." Yeah, he was a sweet guy.
Oh,
So it's like,
yeah.
I wish that would have worked out for you, but it's like that's the way life unfolds sometime. And
Yeah. So again, with that, now I can talk about it. Before I was just a mess. I was a zombie for over 2 years. But
yeah,
in that dead time, oh
yeah,
my God, I wrote the book, I created my conference, I bought a house in Costa Rica out of nothing,
right,
manifested, created whatever.
right.
And when I was like literally just dead and dying and wanted to die and had a broken heart and all of that. So it just really does show you that, what amazing what you can do. But yeah, he was a sweetheart. He was,
And that's a good example of what you just said, is that your energy potential is always greater than your story, right? So you got a broken heart and blah, 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 blah. But your energy potential is much, much greater than that. You didn't get in the way of your energy potential. And a lot of people get in the way of it. And that's their dilemma. They get in the way. They stop it. They say, I can't do this. Yeah, I can't. You didn't say I can't. You just said, oh my God, like you missed him. And he was a sweet guy. And he just he made some bad choices. And once again, he found some broken people. That ex-wife was a broken pain in the butt. And he tried to fix that. And it's like, it's something he should never taken on. But that's where runaway healers are, right? It's just like and you see that all the time. It's like, oh my gosh, it takes a lot of discipline to be able to say no to some of those people, right? It's like, it's really, really tough. It's like, you know, and
yeah.
so that's one of the hardest lessons to learn in this business. It's like, I can't fix everybody. And I kept working with a guy right now. 35 years ago, I did a healing on him, and he got over this pain in his neck and everything. And now all of a sudden he has a little family squabble. His daughter, who's been married, has kids, is getting divorced, and it locked up his neck. And so he found me out of the blues somewhere, a phone number, and called me. And so I've been working with him to try to get his neck to unwind. So he actually had to quit work. He was out of work for years because his body locked up and he couldn't get it to work. He went through physical therapy, he went through psychology, he went through everything. And so I worked with him. It took about a month or two, and we got him to where he functioned, and he got back into life. And you know, every morning he gets up at 4 o'clock, and he climbs a local mountain every morning at 5 in the morning. He goes
Wow.
a couple miles up a mountain and back down again. And I look at that
Wow.
and I go, he said, well, I don't do anything really important. I said, you have a relationship with a mountain, you fool. You go climb a mountain. How many people climb a mountain? Right? That's an accomplishment, right? They give awards to people that climb mountains. You climb a mountain. Yeah, it's redundant maybe, but you climb a mountain. And you have volunteered for how many times as a softball coach? You've been doing that. He said, I was never very good as a kid playing softball, but I'm a good coach. I said, yeah, because you believe in the kids. You climb the mountain, man. So that's your
That's
accomplishment. If you don't do anything else in life, you climb the mountain. That's it.
right.
Yeah.
Right. Wow. That's
Like,
amazing.
wow. So
Yeah.
finding value in what he does accomplish has started to heal his body. And so it just seems so simple. Yes, it does take some time, but it seems so simple that you would think everybody could just get it, but they don't get it. They just get so rigid. Like, wow, I just want to fight. It's all a struggle.
Yeah.
Like, God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or want other people to fix it for them. Fix it. Fix me.
Right.
Find me. Show me.
Right.
And Yeah, give me money, help me, and it never works that way.
No, it doesn't
It's
work out.
always going to be us doing it. Yeah, always. Wow.
Right.
All right, Mister. Well, I will put this out. It's 7 o'clock here at night. I will put this out. What is it? Friday tomorrow. I will put this out, I think on Saturday, make them wait, because lots of people did write and say, when's he coming back? When's Dr. Chris coming back?
Right.
And so now I'll advertise and then we'll put it out on Saturday. And if I do it on Saturday afternoon here, if you're around when it goes out on Saturday afternoon, it'll be Saturday morning your time, then feel
Okay.
free to jump in the live chat.
Okay. All right. You got it.
Perfect. And then
Thank you.
can you email me any and all links that you want me to put in under the broadcast? Like your website,
Just Chris at Wizards Catch. That's it.
Chris Wizards Catch.
So if they
Okay.
have any questions, they can email chris@wizardscatch.com. That's it.
Okay.
And that's the same one you had before. Chris@wizardscatch.com.
Yeah, that's one of,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's the one you email me at. I know you got several email addresses. I still got one of your old ones I use.
Really? Oh my
The kids
God.
one. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's my main one, Kids Soul Speak. I still use
Yeah.
that. I'm very attached to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, brilliant. That's it then. Just an email for you is all you want.
Yeah.
You don't want to
If
your
you have any questions,
channel.
email me. Yeah, I'd be glad to. People email me a question, I can email them back and answer. That's kind of nice. I like to be of assistance if I can. And
Oh,
yeah, I've got blogs up there, I got talks up there, whatever, and it's just kind of the same theory we're going on. It's just like, you know, um, you just put it out there and hope it reaches whoever needs it. That's pretty much what I do.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Is Deb doing okay?
Pardon?
Deb doing okay?
Yeah. Oh yeah. She's doing fine. She's been putting out a release every year. She's got another one coming out in February. So so yeah, she's been staying busy and with her music business. And she's, I think, trying to kind of get all these projects in her head out before she decides that she's going to retire from it, if she ever decides to retire from it. But
Oh,
yeah, before COVID, we
yeah.
would go around and I did lectures and several different places, like Kansas, Denver, different cities, Chicago. And I would do lectures sometimes at universities, sometimes wherever, sometimes church groups, wherever. And they would pay you a little something for the lecture. So it paid for our trip. And I would have her come out and play some songs or do some music as an introduction. And so we kind of teamed up and did that for a while, and it was really kind of fun. But
Oh,
so yeah, so she's still active. She just finished a project with a guy in Norway, Eric Wallow, and so that's the one that'll be out in February. And
oh no.
Eric came to our house and went with us, and we went around to the Apache reservation. And he
Mm,
was really, as Norwegian, it's like, wow, this is amazing, right? So we recorded singing, chanting, and all that stuff. We put out a release way back then, maybe 8 years ago, and now we did a follow-up release with more stuff that we had. And Eric is not only a musician in Norway, but he's now becoming an artist in Norway. So he sent us some of his art, and his wife was a photographer and originally a nurse, but she became a photographer, and now she's an artist. So here they are,
mm,
as they retire in life, they're taking on a whole new scope of profession. So you see, they don't just give up on life. They're also the same way. They just follow the energy, and it's just
right.
going to take them wherever it's going to take them. And he was very crushed for a while because his sister had died. She was a really sweet lady, and then but she died suddenly, and I don't know, just one of those things. But he was really broken because they were very, very close, and so we didn't hear from him for about a year until he was worked his way through that. But he said that
Mm,
made him sit down and start to paint and draw. Is when his sister died, because she loved doing that, and he never had the patience. So he said, in honor of my sister who I loved, I'm going to do this work. So
ah,
So you can turn something around and make an accomplishment, no matter what, right? And that's it. So it's like,
no matter, it's all choice, isn't it? Definitely. Wow.
Right.
All right, my love. Say
Okay.
hi to Dad for me.
You take care.
All right, lots of love.
Take
See you
care.
soon.
See you later.
Bye.